My very special guest leads Impact Performance Group's research and design team, providing custom leadership, sales, and service solutions that enable organizations to deepen client relationships and ignite employee engagement. She significantly impacts employee well-being and performance by applying expertise in emotional intelligence, appreciative inquiry, and positive organizational scholarship. She is an ICF certified coach, holds a Bachelor of Science from Boston College, a Master of Business Administration from New York University, and a Master in Applied Positive Psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She is Liz Corcoran. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Thanks so much, Matt. Happy to be here.
It's wonderful seeing you again. We've had the chance to collaborate a little bit, both in our work together as professors over at Boston College and a little bit here and there. And I had you on one of my other shows at Perspectives, the webinar series, and you just did a fabulous job. And now here we are having our own one-on-one conversation. I love it.
Love that.
Well, I tell you that I talk a lot to my clients about something I refer to as these optimal outcomes. So I thought maybe I'd just share them with the audience. Maybe there's some new listeners out there. I call them optimal outcomes because I like to frame everything in a talent optimization sort of mode. And I always say that we have to try to ensure that we're producing the highest possible levels of performance, engagement, well-being, growth, and impact. And that's why I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Liz, because you have a 5-part framework that we're going to be walking through today that talks about how to help workers thrive in pursuit of these types of outcomes. So I thought we might start with well-being, the one right in the middle. It's something that kind of cropped up after the pandemic in particular. Now we know we're talking a lot about work-life balance, et cetera. And my question for you, Liz, to get us started, what are some of the barriers that we encounter when we're trying to elevate, for example, our levels of well-being or even happiness at work?
In fact, there was just an article in Harvard Business Review that came out that says we are still lonely. And Gallup in their survey this year said 1 out of 5 workers are experiencing loneliness at work, when working with others, when being on teams. So one might be our interactions with others, the quality of them. The second is the pressure to always be busy. Right, we're always supposed to be doing. We're human beings, but we're always supposed to be doing. So I think the day-to-day pressures of time frames, workload, that pushes us and has us not necessarily pay attention to ourselves and show compassion for others. I think that can get in the way.
It's amazing when you think about the isolation issue. Did not see this coming. Like we totally had to shift toward hybrid work and fully remote for a while there and whatever we do today. But it's amazing that we can still be in the presence of other people, at least electronically, but still feel that level of isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But I think there's something about being together. And I think people have gotten much better at using platforms like Zoom or WebEx or Teams to build some of that connection. But we don't have that relaxed downtime or overhearing one another's conversation or walking to go get lunch. And I think that's really missed. I think those connections are really missed.
Yeah, I've been talking to some people as well that talk about how every time you hop on a Zoom, it's almost like you almost have an agenda wired into it because you almost have to be so intentional about setting a Zoom meeting, for example. And so then as soon as you pop on, you might say some niceties here and there, but it's so different than, like you said, walking to a restaurant to grab some lunch and you just have a different level of and type of connection. So something about that in real life connection that we're missing.
Yeah, or even walking into a meeting and deciding where to sit. We don't do that now. You're all of a sudden placed into like a Jeopardy-like square, and people are arranging meetings back to back. So you don't even have that transition time.
No, and the busyness is so true as well. I feel like there's always this constant push towards highest levels of productivity. I know for years we've talked about whether it's Cal Newport talking about deep work and the need to kind of get off of that wheel, so to speak. But it's hard when there's such a pace. And I know that during the economic downturn recently, there's been a heavy focus on efficiency at all costs almost. And I think a lot of times the subliminal message there is, hey, if you're not busy, something's wrong. We almost carry it like a badge of honor, which is a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
I think that when you think about some of the different challenges we have, what are some ways then that we can target, I should say, well-being? If we do want to start to improve it, what are some techniques that we might want to consider?
Well, I think people have focused on flourishing, well-being, happiness. Those have been big topics. In fact, there's some of the biggest courses being taught at our universities now because students are feeling the opposite of that, which is like so much stress and anxiety and depression. But there's a model. So at UPenn, I got a chance to study under Marty Seligman. And he proposes a well-being model that's 5 elements of, and the model's a PERMA model, PERMA. And so those elements are really striving to intentionally experience positive emotions, more engagement at work, liking what you're doing and getting energy from it. Relationships, which is probably, it's in the middle of PERMA, probably one of the most important, meaning that you care about what you're doing and you see the why you feel valued in it, and then accomplishment. If we master how to bring those elements into our life day to day, we personally can elevate our experience of well-being and those around us.
I think that's why this is such a great conversation for us to be having, because this show is really all for aspiring leaders, for people who have some impact. They're interested in studying the craft of leadership, but we're people too. So I love the fact that a lot of times the topics we talk about on the show, they're very much about, start with yourself. I always say as leaders, we have to go first. And in some cases, this means ensuring we're having the highest possible levels of these positive psychology elements that you're sharing with us, but then also recognize that we have a responsibility to shape the environment, the interactions we have with others who we're taking along with us on these journeys, right? So I'd love to, as best we can, kind of tackle both of those sides of that coin as we have our conversation, but we'll start with positive emotions. You mentioned those. Why are those so important? And in your work with Marty Seligman and in your own continuing efforts, what is the tie in there between positive emotions and the way we show up at work?
Yeah, well, we've studied in the field of psychology, we've studied negative emotions quite extensively, anger, depression, anxiety. What we haven't studied until the past 2 decades was positive emotions, like what good are they? How do they help us? And it turns out that we experience positive emotions on a daily basis 4 times more than we experience negative emotions. But when you ask someone how their day is, they will almost always get quickly drawn to what went wrong today. What was difficult, what was challenging, what stress am I experiencing? And that's because our brain has been developed to look for threats. And so why positive emotions? Positive emotions allowed us to broaden our view and build resources for resilience. And we know with all the change going on in the world, we need to be resilient and adaptive. So positive emotions like joy, gratitude, fun, kindness, curiosity, they become really important during the workday, and they can happen. We need to notice when they're happening, and then we need to create events. Like as leaders, how do we create events where people can have fun? When we're having more fun, we bring our best self. We're more creative. Because what Barbara Fredrickson discovered is in this broaden and build theory, when we open our view and we're broader, we're more open to others in the connection, but we're also more open to ideas. And so everyone wants creativeness and innovation. Well, the way to get it is let your people play. Let them have fun. Let them care for one another.
It feels so frivolous, though. When there's this thing that works against us in organizations where we feel like we have to be so efficient and so productive and squeeze every minute. But then when you say that the biggest innovations and the most creativity comes from play, it comes from space and openness and giving people almost downtime to be able to allow novel connections to be made and all these things. How do you strike that balance between the pressure to always be on the go versus saying, you know what, this is not the best way to get the types of innovation, creativity, and even, wellness and performance that we want?
Absolutely. And it's almost, as a leader, being intentional. If we know Sonia Lubomirsky, who wrote The How of Happiness, proposes a pie. And the pie says, well, 50% of your happiness and your well-being is you have a set point. Like genetically, this is about who I am and how I am. 10% is circumstance, and the other 40, we get to determine, we get to choose. And so we need to notice, I'm being very task oriented. I'm busy, right? It's a crazy day. I'm having a crazy day. Well, maybe I need to stop and breathe for a minute. And maybe I need to say, well, what would be fun in this moment? What might bring out the best in everyone? What would be joyful? When we open our Monday morning meetings, we always start, no matter how many people are in the meeting, we always start going around sharing something. We'll pick a theme. We probably have gone through 50 different themes. But we have recently settled on what was really meaningful to you or enjoyable over your weekend. And it's such a personal connection. And We remember all the project work we talked about. That's important. But I always remember the stories that people told and the pictures they showed. It brings so much warmth into the room. So I think being intentional, just taking the time.
Yeah, I love that you wired it right into the meeting. I sometimes use a technique that I call first 5 minutes. Can we spend the first 5 minutes doing something exactly like what you're sharing, Liz? Because you can have the whole rest of the meeting, the whole other 25 minutes or 55 minutes. You can talk worky work stuff all you want. But when you lead with the positive emotion, you're sort of attuning your mind to really focus on those things that we need for the resilience and the creativity you talked about earlier. So powerful stuff. I like that. But you're making it, operationalizing it is what I should say, because you put it right into the agenda like that.
Yeah. We have one other practice, which is when people list their priorities for the week, we have them do one reflection, and it's a gratitude reflection. You don't have to do it. You don't have to make up something you're grateful for. But the practice of gratitude is extremely powerful in refocusing people back to what went well. And so often we're on to the next thing. In even making mistakes and learning from them is something that could have gone well. So we also have built in a moment of gratitude. And so people will write down what they're grateful for. Maybe they were in a pinch. Maybe they were having trouble meeting a deadline. Maybe they had to reach out for help, and they'll write it. I really appreciated how these two colleagues came in, stepped in with me, and helped me through this portion of the project. It meant a lot. And I think that it helps bring also in that sense of a positive emotion and a connection among the team.
I like it. So we've covered in the PERMA framework, we've covered the P of positive emotion. The E, though, stands for engagement. So we know that when we take a look at employee engagement, this is not new. We've looked at this for decades, and we've kind of been in these situations where it can fluctuate some. And right now it seems that engagement is down a bit today. So my question to you, Liz, is like, what's accounting for some of that, and what might we do about it?
Yeah, engagement, I think about 23%, let's say 25% of the people at work at any point feel really engaged. That means what are the other 75 feeling? And especially if some of them are working remotely. So I think what gets in the way is people really not understanding, not thinking about how they're going to do their work and how they can bring their strengths into their work, and not understanding how their work is connected to others. So, if I feel disengaged, it's like, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. I'm not sure if I want to do this. This feels rote. I feel bored. So if someone feels overwhelmed or bored, that can get them right out of flow. And a lot of people, when they're taking on a very challenging goal or starting a new job, they can feel very overwhelmed with the learning curve. On the other hand, if they're doing the same thing every day and they're not bringing meaning to it, they can be bored. And those drive a great deal of disengagement.
Yeah, I know that. I don't believe I've talked about it on the show, but I've certainly written about it, which is this notion of the individual zone of optimal functioning. And when you start thinking about this curvilinear relationship, statistics nerds and psychologists like you and I, we call it, where you can imagine that it's almost like an upside down smiley face on a bar graph, and where it's too low, the way, Liz, that you're talking about, and now I'm bored, performance is lower, but then it goes up to a point, and then it'll come back down if I start to get overwhelmed. And so it's that curvilinear relationship. We're trying to really hit in the center of that zone, but then also to recognize that people have different sort of thermostat settings about how much stimulus they need to really be at their best. And that can change depending on your life circumstances too. So if what Liz is talking about is pretty complex as you're listening in, the truth is it is, but as a leader, you have to understand it for yourself. Like, where am I today? Am I overstimulated? Am I understimulated, for example? Where are my people? Like, what can I do to sort of, give them more challenging assignments if they need a little boost, or, kind of take something off their plate if they're showing some signs that they're a little bit overworked. Is that something that you think about too, Liz, when you're doing your kind of work and approaching this?
Very much so. And signs of burnout, but signs of boredom or anxiety, like looking for those and seeing what someone needs in that moment.
You brought up strengths too, which is so important. I think a lot of my work always comes back to alignment and fit and the natural flow that can happen when we get that alignment right. And to me, so much of, as I get older, Liz, you can see on the camera here, I've got these gray whiskers coming in. It comes down to energy for me. I'm really interested in energy flowing through organizations, because when we start talking about moving resources around or producing, work itself is just producing results through the result of effort, right? So I think that alignment, I really like this analogy now of when the alignment's there, then the energy flows most naturally through the organization. But where there's a misalignment, I'm not using my strengths and maybe I'm not fully engaged, I'm not going to show up with as much depth or as much, vigor as I would otherwise. And I think that's a lot of what we see in these statistics is we've lost some of that connection, knowing how to do our work. Our values and priorities have shifted, but work hasn't necessarily kept up. And that's what causes this sort of shunted, wasted energy inside of organizations.
Yeah. So looking at that, in fact, statistically, I think in the field of positive psychology, strengths and use of strengths is one of the most studied areas. There's a tremendous amount of effort of productivity going up even 18 times when you can get people to use their top strengths. And it's really important as a leader, is someone in a role where there is misalignment. You're asking them to do things that completely drain them. We, as a team, an impact performance group, all did our strengths and understood our signature strength, our top 5 strengths. And though many of the people on the team do the same job, they do it very differently. And their strengths were very different. And they were finding when it came to like detailed project work, they were bored to death. It just drained the pajamas out of them. They didn't. Other people loved being in front of the client, which some people didn't like. So we teamed people up and asked them, when you're doing something that drains you, phone a friend, ask for help, invite someone in that actually gets charged up by doing that. And we have become so much more productive and happier.
Yeah. Complementary strengths like that. I love it. We sometimes feel like we have to be all things, and you can't be, you shouldn't be. I think early in my career, I tried to become decent at a lot of things like project management, detail work, whatever it might be. But then as I got older, I thought, there's limits to how much you can actually do and even enjoy. So now I have a lot more success trying to partner up with people who are complementary in that way. And I don't try to do what they do, and I try to make sure I meet their needs. It always seems to work out a lot better. But we're kind of starting to now get into the R of PERMA, which is around relationships. And I want to know if there's any sort of ideas that you might have when it comes to how do we optimize our relationships if we're in pursuit of that type of thriving we've talked about earlier, the well-being, the flourishing, these things that really positive psychology holds up for us as things that we can and should work for.
There's Jane Dutton out of University of Michigan has studied relationships in organizations and the significant impact that they play, but it's in the middle of PERMA. It's the most predictive thing of our health. We will live longer if we have good relationships. We'll be more productive at work. We're less likely to leave the organization. So how do you do it? One of the ways that Jane proposes is high quality connections. And that is just taking a micro moment. Your whole day is made of micro moments, but take a micro moment to notice, pay attention to someone, show them mutual regard and respect, and find a way to connect. Ask something about them. And by doing so, we get connected and energized, and so do they. And it starts to build relationship and rapport and trust and openness. We want to bring our authentic self to work. Well, one way to do it is to get to know others and let them get to know you. And so these micro moments, we capitalize on those. Get to know the people you work with. Don't just be task oriented.
Love that. Love that. There's this kind of a social energy. We feed off of one another in this way. And not everyone is as overtly sort of all about it. But I think that having that sort of connection, what I'm also hearing a lot, Liz, that you're describing is something I sometimes refer to as rehumanizing work. Work itself is becoming very mechanistic because of advances in technology and management structures, et cetera. And in some cases, it needs to be for us to be able to have highly predictable, scalable work. But we have to offset a lot of that to rehumanize it, make sure we're getting things like these relationship parts right. I feel like that's kind of this area. And what you've just said to us is being able to recognize and make that connection. It improves things like retention. We see that. A lot of times I see in engagement survey questions now, do you have a best friend at work? And there's been studies on besties, right, at work. So it's pretty amazing. And I wonder if there's anything else you might share with us about relationships. Like if we're out to try to say, like, let's say I'm listening in on the call and I'm a team leader. So I'm not the most senior person in the organization. Hypothetically, what are some things I can do to ensure that my teammates have better relationship building opportunities with one another, and that I'm taking advantage of that as well as the team leader? Like what advice might you have there?
Yeah, building in social events where people can get to know one another out of the job and explore common interests is super important, more than ever. And when we get too busy, we don't set enough of them up. Or we say people are remote, we can't do something. So being creative about what we do online and in situations like this and in person, celebrating people's special moments. If it's an accomplishment, if it's a birthday, taking the time to celebrate together. There's a lot of community that's built that way. People love it. And then recognizing people. Positive recognition is very powerful. And people want to add value, but they also want to feel valued. And so making them feel valued and giving them a sense of belonging. So what are you doing to create a team that feels that sense of team, that sense of being part of something bigger than themselves?
I love that. Love that. So we're continuing to cook through our PERMA model here, and we get to the M, which is all about meaning. So meaning has really been found to be critical for having the type of thriving and flourishing at work that we've been talking about. But let's be honest, sometimes we end up working in companies like if I work for a dry cleaner or a grocery store or whatever it might be, something that might not jump off the page at you about like the most meaningful thing ever. How can we ensure that the people that we're working with or who work for us, for example, have a chance to experience that type of meaning, even in those roles that are not, out necessarily as clearly saving the world or making a contribution, nonprofit, et cetera?
Right. Then, well, if people understand how what they do impacts others and impacts the overall goal and vision of the company, and it's aligned with their values, they will derive more meaning. And any job can be meaningful. For instance, there's a very famous work done around someone who called the place they worked the House of Hope, and that they found that they were the ones that gave hope and care to the patients. And so we would guess it was probably a nurse or one of the doctors, and it was actually the custodian of the hospital who knew that the care that they gave, checking in with the patients, making sure everything around them is clean, making sure they have what they need, keeping it sanitized so they come and go, in more of a healing place. But I was just at a social event with a friend, and she works in a restaurant, and I was talking to her about her job. Again, she waits tables. So you might say, okay, that's not the fancy job where she might, and she said, I have been assigned to the catering area and the banquet area. And every day I'm dealing with someone's special moment. So I'm dealing with birthdays, anniversaries, the birth of a child, someone's retirement. So very important life events. Someone's launching a business and they brought in all their artwork. And she said, I'm making memories with these people. Incredible things happen in that room. And I'm part of it. And the way I make it joyful for them and comfortable for them and meaningful so they can celebrate. And I thought that is a really cool way to look at what you're doing and the impact you have on that moment.
It's incredible. And it's so much of it is about framing. It's about mindset. It's about explanatory style. Sometimes we refer to it when we talk about psychological frameworks, but it's always a choice that we have. And I think that even if you work in a hospital system, for example, and you're saving lives, but you approach your work transactionally, you could avoid the meaning, right? And you could sort of erode the meaning and have a burned out situation and a tougher go. But then I love the creativity, and it's not that much of a stretch, but it's just about the reframing of saying, like, I might be waiting tables, to the outside observer, but that's not how I see it. That's what matters, how you see it. And I think that a lot of times as leaders in organizations, we have to really do a better job of trying to show the impact of our products, our services, our very existence in the world as how it actually benefits our stakeholders, whether it's our customers, but also potentially our community, whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that that's where meaning, those connecting the dots is so critical when it comes to meaning and significance and values, as you just mentioned, Liz. It doesn't take long and it doesn't cost money, but it's too rarely done. Yeah. And that's what always surprises me. But when you start to actually make those connections, then I think it does, really start to pay dividends, and it can really change all the things we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Existentially, we're like, what's my purpose? What do I do every day? What gets me up and get energized? What am I contributing? We all come to work wanting to do a great job. What are we contributing? And also, is anyone noticing? Are we valued and being valued for what we're doing? So the manager, and it's also, this research plays out that managers are so often the reason we stay and the reason we go.
Right.
So the manager helping create that meaning and valuing the person for their contributions is essential.
Yeah, and I think we've really seen big changes in the post-pandemic with all generations at work, asking that question about, I don't want to just work for a paycheck anymore. I want to have some meaning. I want to make sure that I have my priorities are being met. And certainly with early career workers, it seems each successive generation is more attuned to those higher order things than ever before. So I think it's really sage advice to say, let's make sure that our people see the meaning in the work they do, that we've done everything we can, at least to open that door, let them walk through it, of trying to see their work in the proper light and see how they're contributing to either the welfare of their teammates or to the end work product or the client's benefit or making memories, as you shared in that example. Like all of it, it's all right there for us if we're willing to go there and not just focus on the transactional bits alone. But I'll fast forward us to the last one in the PERMA framework, which is the A, which is for accomplishment. So we have these different approaches to work. A lot of it comes down to goals. We give it all the alphabet soup of KPIs and OKRs and all this good stuff. But talk to me about accomplishment and feeling a sense of accomplishment, how it's similar to, or maybe even different from, in some cases, the kind of goals that we typically set in management frameworks at work.
Yeah, so I think there's a difference between accomplishment, which feeds into our well-being, and achievement. So both are important, but in achievement, we have a goal and we're typically doing it for the external reward, right? I achieved a badge. I achieved a bonus. I achieved something, the next level of, it's almost like a game we're playing, right? I send it to the next level. In accomplishment and the work around goal setting theory, it is personalized, it is challenging, and it is specific. And our accomplishing this addresses intrinsic reward. So we're doing it because we want to do it for the sake of doing it. And so finding out when we're working with people and setting goals, finding out what's important to them and things that they will find personally rewarding keeps them on goal much more effectively. Because talking about a hedonic treadmill, in achieving, we keep thinking we want to get to the goal until we get there and it's like, oh, that wasn't as exciting as I thought, or oh, that doesn't feel like I wanted it to feel. If we're working with intrinsic goals, it does feel that way. It feels very personally satisfying.
Yeah, goal setting theory is so powerful. I know you've studied it just as I have, and the nature of goals being energizing and directive, and we start to form strategies so we can actually boost success. We have to get good at setting goals. But I think what you're describing is the attachment to them as being the thing that's going to make us happy. That's not the purpose of goals. And I think a lot of times we get that wrong. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. So this PERMA, and I'll just summarize it again for us. So we started off the conversation talking about how the optimal outcomes, as I describe them, really set themselves up, as you describe it, to be something that will help us thrive, to help us flourish. It's really the pinnacle of positive psychology at work, and applied positive psychology. It makes our organizations run better. It makes our people better. Only good things happen. The PERMA framework, which talked about positive emotions, as well as engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, these are the things that are going to allow that to flow as naturally as possible. If that's a summit. Anything else you'd kind of point out about PERMA and how you like to think of it or utilize it in pursuit of these work objectives?
I do. The underpinning of PERMA is also, we need a basis of mental and physical health. Mm-hmm. So leaning into mindfulness and movement, watching our nutrition, watching our sleep, hygiene, those become super important. We've given strategies for what to do at work around PERMA, and just know PERMA is supported by us doing also the foundational things that make us feel healthy and also influence how we interact with others.
That makes total sense. And I agree with you 100%. When we think about wellness, I've really been interested to see the more holistic definitions of it. Now, some organizations even describe it. I've seen McKinsey as well, getting into areas beyond just physical, mental, emotional, relational, financial, spiritual. All of it is really coming into the workplace. And we expect our employers to play a supportive role, at least, in helping us find these wellness pathways. So I think in combination of everything positive psychology has taught us about how we can flourish in life and certainly at work, as well as what, the workforce is demanding from us as leaders and as employers. I'm actually very excited about the future. It's not going to be easy, but we kind of have a roadmap. We kind of know what we need to do. We just have to figure out how to kind of let go of some of our outdated ways of approaching the work and still incorporate these things that you've shared with us today, Liz. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to shift gears and I want to have a little bit of fun. We talked about having fun earlier. Let's experience some positive emotions in the form of a trivia game. I have AI here. You and I are going to be a team that's going to ask us a trivia question here. And for this one, a lot of times we have this misbranding, or I'll call it, when it comes to positive psychology, just being about happiness. But I thought I could get us a question about happiness. So this is what AI says. What hormone is referred to as the happiness hormone? Oh, interesting.
Well, we know when we exercise, we get endorphins, and we know cortisol is the stress one.
Yeah.
So serotonin.
Serotonin helps. Yeah.
That's the love one.
Yeah. It could be dopamine. I think dopamine is in there too.
Well, isn't that why we grab our phone all the time? We do. Yeah. We hit it for the dopamine hit.
It's almost like we know too much about this. You want to try endorphins? You want to try that one?
Sure.
Let's try that. So if you're playing along at home, audience, you can lock in your answer. We're just going to go with that one and see what it says here. There's so many to choose from. It says you're close. They do play a role in happiness, but they're most closely associated with pain relief and feelings of euphoria. The serotonin was the actual answer. There you go. So you win this round, AI, but Liz and I are coming for you. Don't worry. Liz, I got a much better question for you. My audience, they want to follow along and learn more about you. Where can they go to do that?
They can go to Impact Performance Group, and the website is impactpg.com, and it will tell all about our offerings, and all the offerings are infused with emotional intelligence and positive psychology and appreciative inquiry, really building that connection. So it's a great place to learn. And of course, I'm at LinkedIn.
Love it. Listeners, I'm going to have those links for you in the show notes. You're only one click away from getting in touch with Liz, learning more about Impact Performance Group. Liz, I've enjoyed our conversation. I love being a colleague of yours over at Boston College. Just really enjoy all that you're doing to make this world of work of ours a better place.
Thanks so much, Matt. It's been great talking with you about this, and I admire your work so much.